Joining us now is our good friend who's back with us this year on the show. It's a little later than normal we have her, but hey, she's busy. Um, Not to mention she's busy listening to her sister, who's also in the industry. We got to
Yeah.
talk about that too. We haven't talked about that yet, actually. Now that I thought about it, she's going to be part of the broadcast this weekend in the coverage on Pac-12 Network. Huge series this weekend: UCLA and Arizona State. Pac-12 title implications. I speak of our good friend Kenzie Fowler joining us. Kenzie, you got to be excited here. This is a big series. UCLA-Arizona State. Normally it is, but I don't know if anybody saw this coming as being as big as it's going to be. First of all, how you doing?
I'm doing great. So excited to be on the whole series this weekend, all three games, which is a big deal. And yeah, this is definitely to me the biggest series of the year for the Pac. So it's coming down to UCLA and ASU, and it's going to be in Tempe. I think the temperatures are going to be about 100 degrees. So it's going to be hot on the field. Bats are going to be hot. The pitching is going to be hot. It's going to be fun.
First of all, how surprised are you surprised that this series has got so much ramifications, considering what Arizona State lost last year? I think Arizona State is. I think people thought, hey, they could be pretty good, but not as good as last year, considering what they lost offensively. But they've shown that they can just reload, and I think a lot of people are curious to learn about Arizona State, and we're going to learn a lot about them here in the next couple of weeks.
Yes, and it's one thing to have the year that they've had, but it's going to be very telling after a weekend like this, going up against the consistent powerhouse, right? UCLA, who's just delivering every single year, and a top 10 team year in and year out. So it's a big test for Arizona State, right? Because they have all these hot offensive numbers, and a lot of people are kind of looking at them for the first time going, who is this team? Who are these pitchers? They're getting it done. So it's definitely, I think, a bigger weekend for Arizona State than it is for UCLA.
What's worked for them? What stands out to you about them?
To me, I told this to Coach Ford when I had them earlier this year, and she kind of chuckled at me. I said, "You guys are better than you were last year," which was kind of a crazy thing to say. They had two All-American hitters at the top of their lineup, and the Hackbarth twins hitting 20 home runs a season and batting 450, and just the talent that they were putting on the field. They're super athletic, very well balanced. I think they're more well balanced this year than they were last year, which is why I told Coach Ford that they're better. And their pitching is much improved. They have still a very young staff. They have Lindsay Lopez, who's returning, redshirt sophomore, and then Mac Morgan, true freshman, and Marissa Schold, a redshirt sophomore. I want to say it's kind of confusing because she redshirted, the COVID year, and then the year after she transferred from Arizona. So I know she's not a senior. That's all I know. But working together, they all have very different looks. And Coach Ford, I think, is one of the best pitching coaches in the country, and she's done a phenomenal job with those youngsters.
They'll be hosting a UCLA team that has been a little up and down, at least by their standards. Losing 2 out of 3 to Stanford's one thing, but I think a lot of people were caught off guard by that last performance we saw them against Utah, where Utah took it to them. What's your thoughts on this Bruins team who comes in as chasing Arizona State?
Yes, well, I think it's clear that the pitching staff is how you beat this team. You have to beat them through their pitching. And Megan Framo, Holly Acevedo, even Lauren Shaw, they've almost done, to me, they've done too much for this team at this point. They've carried the team more than they've needed to. And it's kind of shocking because you look at the roster that UCLA has and all the talent, returning All-Americans. Offensively, kind of scuffling just a little bit, like you said, for their standards. But I will say, to kind of defend that, they've had to deal with a bunch of injuries and players coming in and out of the lineup all season long, and they just haven't been able to have a consistent lineup. Every time I look at their lineup, it's different. They have different people batting, different people defending, because they're missing key parts. They're missing, Tessa Ulu at third base, a Kinsley Washington, of course, Aaliyah Jordan, that's a big one as well. But I think maybe they're starting to find their way a little bit. I just feel like we haven't seen them get in a rhythm all season long, especially the last month in Pac. I feel like that's been a very tough. Last month was a very tough month for them. So we'll see if they can kind of round a corner, but without a doubt, you have to go through the pitching staff if you're going to want to beat them.
It's been a quirky year in the Pac-12. We just had Jessica Mendoza on. This is like a Pac-12 week, by the way, alum-wise. We got
Nice.
Mendoza and you here. You're following Jess. But she talked about, like, just when you think somebody's about to step up and rise in the Pac-12, there's like a trip up somewhere. Like, whether it be Stanford beating Arizona State. Stanford is probably the example. They beat Arizona State. They've beaten UCLA, but they lose to a Cal, for example. Cal beats Washington. But Washington then comes in. It's been wild. How would you describe this 2022 Pac-12 season to this point?
Yeah, I think the top of the pack maybe isn't as strong as it was last season with having UCLA, Arizona, Washington consistently in that top 10 ranking. But I think the middle is so much stronger than it was last season, which is, I think, a benefit because you're seeing all these crazy scores. Really, anyone can beat anyone. And I think it's going to make the conference stronger as a whole. Utah's improved, Cal's improved. They've taken some top wins like we were talking about. I think Oregon State is much improved, Stanford much improved. So I think for the standards, Arizona and Oregon maybe having down seasons, I say that quote unquote, but still very good ball clubs with what we've seen at times. It's just kind of a consistency for those squads. So I just think all in whole, the teams are better, but the top isn't as dominant as we've seen the last couple of seasons.
Well, I want to ask you about Washington when it comes to Mike, because I think a lot of people thought Washington would be right in the mix. They got off to a slow start, lost to Cal in a series 2 out of 3, got swept by UCLA. A lot of people were like, what's going on? Arguably, you might have been at the location when they started to turn their season around when they were against Arizona, and they had those dramatic come from behind wins with Bailey Klingler, who I know you've said on the air that she should be the Pac-12 Player of the Year without question, and maybe could be a finalist. She's now a top 10 finalist for Player of the Year, maybe gets into that mix. But talk about Washington, because really since that Arizona series, I know they lost that last game of that series on a walk-off, but it seems like their play has gone a different level, and now they're kind of the hot team as far as projections are concerned, and they could be back to what we thought they would be when we saw them in Clearwater.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that weekend was the weekend Sammy Reynolds came back. She was out with concussion protocol for most of the month, and then returned against Arizona. And I think adding her bat to be paired around Klingler is the biggest difference maker in the world, because you kind of look past her, right? She's maybe 5'4", maybe 5'3", so doesn't give you that presence that Klingler has, but she's so consistent. She's such a tough out. She's constantly on base, and it just makes pitching to Klingler that much tougher. And we saw that weekend with Reynolds and the Klingler combo. I will say also for Washington, I feel like Kelly Lynch is on an uptrend, and that's been a big talking point for them is who's going to back up Gabby. Gabby's, of course, the ace. Is she pitching too much? Is she tired in postseason? Is she carrying too much of the load? And I have seen Kelly Lynch start to take more and more starts every single weekend, and I feel like her outings are getting better. The last couple of outings, she struck out 15 plus, which is crazy. I don't care who you're pitching against. You've got to have those strikeout numbers. And so I think that's a good trend for them, and maybe a team that you'd buy stock in right now for sure.
Very much so. It's the Pac-12 will obviously have a conference tournament next year. If there was a tournament this year, I think a lot of people would trendy pick Washington if there was one, right? And that's how good they played. And Gabby playing started to become Gabby playing recently, and they look really good and sweeping Stanford.
Look, I'm never gonna bet against Gabby playing. Like, I know maybe her ERA a little bit higher than it has been because she's been so dominant for so long, and so it's just crazy for us to have that type of expectations when you're so scouted. Everybody knows what you throw. They're preparing for you, and she's still Gabby. Like, she's still got it. So I'm never gonna bet against her, and it's her senior season, so you never know.
I want to ask you about Stanford, because we had Coach Allister on here during the season, and when they're at their peak, they're as good as anybody. I mean, they've beat UCLA 2 out of 3. They've beaten Arizona 2 out of 3. They got great wins non-conference, and yet it seems like when they leave Palo Alto, where they're being Corval or whatever, they struggle on the road. I mean, even though they have great pitching there. What's your thoughts on Stanford? Because I don't know what I'm getting every weekend there when I see Stanford. I'm always surprised that, either they get swept and I figured they would win a game, or they win a series I don't expect them to win. It's kind of all over the place for Coach Allister.
Well, I remember playing, like we would always talk about playing at Stanford and playing on the West Coast, right? A little bit thinner air. You don't have the humidity that the SEC has. And so as a pitcher for home runs, we always felt like as a team that home runs were harder to hit at Stanford. We never really had a reason why that was. We just always like as a team like, oh, we just don't hit the home runs. And so as a pitcher, it was one of my favorite places to pitch at because I always kept the ball at the ballpark versus like even playing at my home field at Hillenbrand. I'm like, oh, got to make sure I spot my rise ball here because a pop-up could just keep drifting and it turned to a 2-run home run. So I don't know if I'm looking too much into that, but maybe Elena Vaughter is very comfortable on her home field. And if she's on her A game, she can beat anybody in the country. And I say that like anybody, she's so good. But you're right. It's just that inconsistency, like what kind of team is going to show up if they have to hit the road, which they will. They don't hit a ton of home runs. They don't hit a ton of extra base hits. They're kind of a singles manufacturer, steal a base here, squeeze bunt there, win a game 3-2, 2-1, which, hey, if that's your thing and you're confident in it, go for it. Like you can win in different ways. But I was laughing at that because I always felt like Stanford was a good pitcher's field for sure.
That's the most sense I've heard so far. So that makes sense. I mean, I think that's a team that could be in somebody's region that nobody's going to be real excited about as a 2 or a 3, pretty much for wherever they get seated on that one. So we'll see. Let's talk about obviously a school I think you're familiar with, Arizona, and Caitlin Lowe in their first year. They've had some injuries themselves, losing Mionio and company. Give me your thoughts on Arizona, though. They've started to kind of seem up level. They've gotten some players back. Your thoughts on Arizona?
Yeah, I think it's been really fun to watch because it's kind of been, I feel like it's like a TV show. Like there's been so many different arcs for different characters and different moments as the team and, really low peaks at times, right? And then some higher valleys. But I feel like that team has started to kind of find themselves individually, and then it's kind of bleeding into the team finding their identity. And I know I'm sure Arizona fans and Arizona players tired of me talking about it, but you graduate the senior class that they did, you're having all these new players play for the first time and take on leadership roles for the first time versus being a follower as a freshman. And I feel like it was just a very bumpy beginning because of that. And so now these players have gotten their consistent starts, they're producing, believing in themselves, seeing the results. And I feel like they're getting better every weekend and starting to kind of figure out who they are as a team. I didn't expect them to come out like gangbusters. I said it's a rebuilding year. I said that the very first week. I said it's going to be a learning process for everyone, new coach, and it has been, and it's trending up. So if you want to see a trend, you definitely want to see it trend up, especially at this time of year. So this team, I turn already to next year. What can you build around this team next year? Because what they're missing is pitching. They have the offense. They have some really good sophomore hitters, and you love to see that nucleus and be able to build upon that. But they're going to have to look into the transfer portal, maybe steal a pitcher here and there. I hear they have some freshmen coming in that can pitch. So it's definitely a weakness for the program right now because they're having to win games 9-8. But it's exciting for next year because the talent offensively has been there and has been showing good things as of late.
Let's kind of talk a little bit nationally because you've been following a certain team in Lincoln, Nebraska's radio broadcasts. And as much as we like Nate Rohr, that's not the reason you're necessarily tuning in. Oh, we like Nate. I've listened to Nate, but his analysts you've been listening. Tell the audience about that analyst because you have a vested interest.
Yes, I feel like I'm an honorary Husker just because my sister played there and she stayed up there, works for the university, but is also the analyst for the radio team. So if I'm not calling a game, or if I'm watching a game on ESPN or something, I'll kind of mute that and have my sister on in the background, listening to her on the Nebraska app. And they've had a heck of a year, so it's been making it so much more fun. Like these dramatic games, these come from behind wins. They're a really tough offensive team, and listening to her break stuff down has been really fun. I try not to too much, but I like send her little thoughts. I'm like, "Ooh, you should say this. Like, this is a really good point." She's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna say that." I'm like, "Okay, sorry." So it's been fun to listen to her and to follow the team. They've had a really good season.
Really great season. It's one of the great stories in the nation right now. Nebraska. Good. I'm glad to hear the critiques that you're giving her. That's good. You're giving her critiques.
And I give her positive things like, "Oh, that was really good. You broke that down really well." And I want her to do that for me as well. So I'm trying to like give me a little something that I can work on, during the game.
Give me your as we got a couple minutes here. Give me your thoughts on this series here. Back UCLA-Arizona State. What are some of the keys for people that are tuning in? What for in this series for whoever wins the series?
Well, it's interesting because, like I was talking about earlier in the ballparks, Tempe pitching at Farrington Stadium, oof, the ball flies. The fences are short, air is thin. Of course, Arizona State, they are a very talented team, but play a lot of games at home, and it's a home run friendly ballpark. And so in comes UCLA with one of the best pitching staffs in the nation. So it's going to be the arms versus the bats. Or on the flip side, you could look at it is kind of the lesser matchup is the pitching for Arizona State and the hitting for UCLA, which is kind of a mixed bag. You have experience with the UCLA offense, but you just haven't seen the results, and you've seen the inexperienced pitching staff that's very young, freshmen, sophomores, and have had really good moments this season. So, I mean, I'm just so excited. I have no idea how this series is going to go, but I will say that whoever shows the best, whoever comes out on top, I really think should be rewarded. I should be rewarded with the top 8 seed, should cement that Supers, that lined up to host the Supers if things work out, because it's going to be that much of a dynamite of a series.
And it's a big showcase. It'll be on Pac-12 Network. You're going to be on part of the broadcast, all 3 games there up in Tempe. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting. Maybe one of the bigger regular season home series in Arizona State in recent years, right?
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Spoken from an Arizona resident. You should be like a historian in that state.
I know. Between Arizona and Arizona State, every weekend I'm just driving up I-10, so it's fine. It's not bad.
It could be a lot worse. Not a bad place to out there be. I know you got to get ready for the series, so I know you've taken some time there. But thanks for doing this, and congrats to Maddie on her broadcast success, and of course being about to become a mom, as we talked.
She is, yeah. I'm calling this weekend, and then I'm going to fly up to Nebraska, where my sister Maddie's about to have her first baby. So I'm going to be an aunt for the first time, and I can't wait. So there's a lot of things going on that in my life right now, but it's all good. I love it. It's a busy time of year for everyone.
Yeah, you get to be an aunt. That's right. So that means they'll get to critique you there as you do games.
I know it. She's having a boy though, so no softball, but maybe baseball. We'll see.
Maybe broadcaster.
Maybe broadcasting.
Also, congrats too. You did a great job. Obviously, you did. A lot of people watched you call the Alabama A&M game with Alex Pearlman too. That was a lot of fun for you as well. Good experience there doing SEC game there for a change.
Yeah, it was really fun. Calling a game from home, called regionals last year from home. So had to break out my equipment and still have it. And it was good to see Alex virtually and getting to call that crazy run rule upset, all the things for Texas A&M. I don't think anybody expected that the game was going to go that way. So we have all our notes, and then all of a sudden the game's just going off the rails, and it's all of a sudden a a run rule situation. You have the walk-off hit, the Gatorade bath. So for one game, it had all the dramatics. It was fun to be a part of for sure.
Probably A&M's best game of the year. Alabama's not best game. I mean, it definitely was a stunner. Just the way it played out. You're right. Could set up the tone though for mayhem in this month of May. And I know you'll be a part of that. We'll try to get you back on either before the post NCAA start or during the NCAA at some point. But in the meantime, good luck this weekend. UCLA-Arizona State, check it out. Pac-12 Network, Pac-12 Championship implications. You'll be on the call there, part of the crew there. Thanks so much for doing this. Always a blast having you on every year.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time.